Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for June the 28th. Today, we are reading together a couple of chapters that go together really well. Judges chapter 4 and Judges chapter 5. Judges chapter 4 gives us the narrative portion of what is stated. Actually, now that I'm looking, I think that there is a screen. There is. I knew it. I was sitting here thinking to myself that my screen looks really blurry, and I could not figure out why it looks so blurry. And I'm pretty sure that the new screen they just put on my laptop has a screen protector on it. I'm pretty sure that's what's going on here. So I apologize that for those that are watching this, the video itself is going to look kind of blurry. I'm sorry for that. I was sitting here thinking to myself, why is the screen looking like it's out of focus almost? So I hope that you'll be able to survive with me doing that real fast. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pause this video. I'm going to get this fixed. And next time you see me, hopefully it's going to be a lot more clear and it's not going to be as bothersome to anyone. So I'm going to pause this, come right back, and hopefully we'll be fixed. Be right back. Okay, I am back, and obviously the resolution is not looking that much better because I realize that there's not a film or anything like that on my screen at all. So I don't really know what the deal is. I guess maybe whenever my laptop had its accident, maybe the camera on it got a little wonky or something like that. I don't quite know. I just double checked on some previous videos, and they definitely did not look this blurry or out of focus. So please accept my most sincere apologies for that. I don't know. I'll do some figuring out, tinkering around. Maybe I can get it fixed up, or maybe I just need to buy an external camera to do these on. I'm not quite sure. Again, my apologies for that. Nevertheless, let's get to some reading for today because even though this picture is a bit blurry, the text itself on the Olive Tree app should be just fine. I don't think there should be any issues here whatsoever. So at least that is good as we read about Deborah and Barak today. They are the, let's see, fourth story. A lot of detail here in chapter 4 about their issues against the enemy. And then what we have in chapter 5 is a song that details some, or that gives us some more background to what is taking place here in the story of Deborah and Barak in chapter 4. So we'll talk about that once we get done reading as well. So let's read together here. Judges chapter 4 and verse number 1, going all the way through chapter 5. We'll see again, notice the common theme or common formula, cycle for the judges, that there's unfaithfulness, which leads to punishment, which leads to a crying out, which leads to deliverance from the judge or judges, I guess, in this portion, just those who get involved in the situation. And then there's peace, which is going to lead to, again, the cycle starting over once we get into chapter 6. So here we go. Judges chapter 4, verse number 1. The Israelites again did what was evil in the sight of Yahweh after Ehud had died. So Yahweh sold them to King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, who lived in Harosheth of the nations. Then the Israelites cried out to Yahweh because Jabin had 900 iron chariots, and he harshly oppressed them 20 years. Deborah, a prophetess and the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She would sit under the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim, and the Israelites went up to her to settle disputes. She summoned Barak, son of Abinoam, from Kedesh in Naphtali, and said to him, "Hasn't Yahweh, the God of Israel, commanded you? Go deploy the troops at Mount Tabor, and take with you 10,000 men from the Naphtalites and Zebulunites. Then I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, his chariots, and his infantry at the wadi to fight against you, and I will hand them over to you." Barak said to her, "If you will go with me, I will go. But if you will not go with me, I will not go." "I will gladly go with you," she said, "but you will receive no honor on the road you are about to take, because Yahweh will sell Sisera to a woman." So Deborah went up and got up and went with Barak to Kedesh. Barak summoned Zebulun and Naphtali to Kedesh. 10,000 men followed him, and Deborah went with him. Now Heber, the Kenites, had moved away from the Kenites, the sons of Hobab, Moses' father-in-law, and pitched his tent beside the oak tree of Zaanaim, which was near Kedesh. It was reported to Sisera that Barak, son of Abinoam, had gone up Mount Tabor. Sisera summoned all his 900 iron chariots, and all the troops were with him from Harosheth of the nations to the Wadi Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Go, this is the day Yahweh has handed Sisera over to you. Hasn't Yahweh gone before you?" So Barak came down from Mount Tabor with 10,000 men following him. Yahweh threw Sisera, all his charioteers, and all his army into a panic before Barak's assault. Sisera left his chariot and fled on foot, and Barak pursued the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth of the nations, and the whole army of Sisera fell by the sword. Not a single man was left. Meanwhile, Sisera had fled on foot to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenites, because there was peace between King Jabin of Hazor and the family of Heber the Kenite. Jael went out to greet Sisera and said to him, "Come in, my lord, come in with me. Don't be afraid." So he went into her tent, and she covered him with a blanket. He said to her, "Please give me a little water to drink, for I am thirsty." She opened a container of milk and gave him a drink and covered him again. Then he said to her, "Stand at the entrance to the tent. If a man comes and asks you, is there a man here? Say no." While he was sleeping from exhaustion, Heber's wife Jael took a tent peg, grabbed a hammer, and went silently to Sisera. She hammered the peg into his temple and drove it into the ground, and he died. When Barak arrived in pursuit of Sisera, Jael went out to greet him and said to him, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." So he went in with her, and there was Sisera lying dead with a tent peg through his temple. That day Yahweh pursued King Jabin of Canaan before the Israelites, or subdued, That day God subdued King Jabin of Canaan before the Israelites, and the power of the Israelites continued to increase against King Jabin of Canaan until they destroyed him. And on that day, Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang, "When the leaders lead in Israel, when the people volunteer, blessed be Yahweh." Listen, kings, pay attention, princes. I will sing to Yahweh. I will sing praise to Yahweh, God of Israel. Yahweh, when you came from Seir, when you marched from the fields of Edom, the earth trembled, the skies poured rain, and the clouds poured water. The mountains melted before Yahweh, even Sinai before Yahweh, the God of Israel. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the main roads were deserted, because travelers kept the side roads. Villages were deserted. They were deserted in Israel until I, Deborah, rose, a mother in Israel. Israel chose new gods. Then there was war in the city gates. Not a shield or spear was seen among the 40,000 in Israel. My heart is with the leaders of Israel, with the volunteers of the people. Blessed be Yahweh. You who ride on white donkeys, who sit on saddle blankets, and who travel on the road, give praise. Let them tell the righteous acts of Yahweh, the righteous deeds of his villagers in Israel, with the voices of the singers at the watering places. Then Yahweh's people went down to the city gates. Awake, awake, Deborah. Awake, awake, sing a song. Arise, Barak, and take your prisoners, son of Abinoam. Then the survivors came down to the nobles. Yahweh's people came down to me against the warriors. Those with their roots in Amalek came from Ephraim. Benjamin came with your people after you. The leaders came down from Machir, and those who carry a marshal's staff came from Zebulun. The princes of Issachar were with Deborah. Issachar was with Barak. They were under his leadership in the valley. There was great searching of heart among the clans of Reuben. Why did you sit among the sheep pens, listening to the playing of pipes for the flocks? There was great searching of heart among the clans of Reuben. Gilead remained beyond the Jordan, and Dan, why did you linger at the ships? Asher remained at the seashore and stayed in his harbors. The people of Zebulun, though, defied death. Naphtali also on the heights of the battlefield. Kings came and fought. Then kings of Canaan fought at Taanach by the waters of Megiddo, but they did not plunder the silver. The stars fought from the heavens. The stars fought with Sisera from their pass. The river Kishon swept them away. The ancient river, the river Kishon, march on, my soul in strength. The horse's hooves then hammered, the galloping of his stallions. Curse Meroz, says the angel of Yahweh. Bitterly curse her inhabitants, for they did not help Yahweh to help Yahweh with the warriors. Most blessed of women is Jael, the wife of Heber, the Kenites. She is most blessed among the tent-dwelling women. He asked for water. She gave him milk. She brought him cream in a majestic bowl. She reached for a tent peg, her right hand for a workman's hammer. Then she hammered Sisera. She crushed his head and shattered and pierced his temple. He collapsed, he fell, he lay down between her feet. He collapsed, he fell between her feet, and where he collapsed, there he fell, dead. Sisera's mother looked through the window. She peered through the lattice, crying out, why is his chariot so long in coming? Why don't I hear the hoofbeats of his horses? Her wisest princesses answer her. She even answers herself. Are they not finding and dividing the spoil? A girl or two for each warrior, the spoil of colored garments for Sisera, the spoil of an embroidered garment or two for my neck. Lord, Yahweh, may all your enemies perish as Sisera did, but may those who love him be like the rising of the sun in its strength. And the land had peace for 40 years. And that is Judges chapter 4 and Judges chapter 5. As we look at this story, first of all, again, I mentioned that a lot of these stories are regionally based. They're not they don't involve Israel as a complete whole, although in this story we do see a number of the tribes being involved. There's 6 tribes, I believe, that are involved, although we see 4 that are mentioned as not getting involved, as explicitly not getting involved, and then there's a couple that are not just mentioned at all, best I can tell. So keep that in mind, that this again is regionally based, and this time it seems to be in about the middle section of the land of Israel. I actually have a map here which shows a good representation of the various places where they believe these judges would have been operating during the stories that are told about them. Let me pull it up. Here we go. A pretty good map here for us to look at. Let's see, I'll share that right here. All right, here we go. So looking at this particular text, I don't think I can make it any bigger. I cannot. We're looking at this text here, or can I? Enter full screen, would that help at all? That helps a little bit. All right, so looking at this text here, or this picture here of this of the lands of Israel, both the western portion of Canaan and also the eastern side. It's a little small to see, but this right here where my cursor is circling is Deborah's box, and the land, the place where a lot of this takes place would have been right here, again, right in the central area of Israel. The issue here, the king that is the aggressor at this point, because of the evil of the people that brought this punishment upon them, was King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. He was the king, and then his commander of his armies was Sisera. And as we read previously, they had iron chariots, and they harshly oppressed the people in this area for 20 years. The text tells us that Deborah was the wife of Lapidoth, and that she was judging Israel during this time. It says that she was judging at the palm tree of Deborah between Ramah and Bethel in the hill country of Ephraim. So Ephraim right here. Bethel is right here. So we're talking right in this area would have been the place where Deborah was judging. Let's see, we have Ramah is here in this place. Here is Bethel. So the tree would have been somewhere in between these two areas. The text says that she was settling disputes for the people under this tree. Now, this in and of itself is not a good sign for Israel. It was a patriarchal culture. So for a woman to have to be in this position of leadership tells you a lot about the lack of leadership and the lack of faithfulness to God that any of the men were displaying. Again, not to degrade Deborah at all necessarily. In fact, in this story, we see women taking a very prominent role. And the parallel account to this, which is the story of Abimelech, also has a woman taking a very prominent role in the fact that she throws a stone down and takes out Abimelech, or would have done so had his servant not killed him, so that he could not say that a woman took him out. So they play very prominent roles in this story, both in a positive way, but also in a negative way once we get to the end of chapter 5 and consider Sisera's mom, or her mother, his mother there. Within the story, though, Barak, the son of Abinoam, who is from Kedesh in Naphtali, which Naphtali is this region, or this area right here. She calls him and tells him that he needs to come and to be the one that God is going to work through in this story, that you hasn't Yahweh, the God of Israel, commanded you to go employ the troops. You're going to get some from Naphtali. So again, your area, you're going to get some from Zebulun as well. And you're going to come and fight against Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, and he's going to give you the victory. But we have Barak here. He's a coward. He's not a confident man. He does not have his confidence in Yahweh, but instead he has confidence in Deborah. And he says, if you go, I'll go. But if you don't go, I won't go. So Deborah says, fine, I will gladly go with you, but know that this road that you're taking, where you're being cowardly, you're going to get no honor from any of this. In fact, the one who is actually going to defeat Sisera is going to be a woman. Now, as we're reading this, we're thinking, oh, well, it's definitely going to be Deborah then. Deborah is going to be the one who's going to take care of Sisera. But then we're introduced in verse 11 to the man named Heber, who was a Kenite, who moved away from the Kenites. And we read that he was living beside the oak tree of Zaanaim, which was near Kedesh. And whenever they go up to fight, so whenever Sisera's army goes up to fight Barak's army, the text says that Deborah said to Barak, go, this is that Yahweh will hand Sisera over to you. Hasn't Yahweh gone before you? So Barak came down from Mount Tabor with the 10,000 men following him, and Yahweh threw Sisera into a panic. Not just Sisera, but his army. He threw his army into a panic before Barak's assault, which is very interesting because there's not very much given here about what that means that he threw him into a panic. Although I think we're going to get more details about that later on within the text of chapter 5. I think we're going to get a little better explanation there. Sisera left on his chariot, fled on foot. He sees that this is a losing cause, so he's just going to go ahead and take off. He does that while his army is being ransacked. So he takes off, he fleds on foot, and he ends up at the tent of Jael, who is the wife of Heber, the Kenites. And the text says that there was actually peace between Jabin's people and the family of Heber, the Kenite. Jael goes up to him, invites him in. She acts like she's going to take care of him, even gives him a glass of milk and a blanket to sleep under. And while his guard is lowered, she actually Jael goes, takes a tent peg and rams it through his skull, kills him, literally stakes him there to the ground. And by the time Barak shows up, she shows him the body of Sisera, and he is already dead. Verse 23 gives us the real point of this text, and what we're also going to see in chapter 5, in the fact that God subdued King Jabin of the Canaanites before Israel. That's really the thing. You get to the end, and we've had a number of players here within the story. We've had Deborah, we've had Barak, we've had Heber, we've had Jabin, or excuse not Jabin, we've had Jael, but really the one at the end of the day who did the work here was Yahweh. Yahweh is the one who pursued or who subdued King Jabin of the Canaanites before Israel, and it was the power as the power of the Israelites continued to increase against King Jabin of Canaan. They did so until they destroyed him. But again, who is supplying that power? It was certainly Yahweh who supplied that power to the Israelites. So that gets us then into chapter 5, which is the song of not just Deborah, but also Barak. It says in verse number 1 that Deborah and Barak, son of Abinoam, sang this song. And this song is a victory song. It is a triumph hymn. It is very similar. We could probably compare it to what we see back in Exodus chapter 15, after God has delivered the Israelites through the Red Sea. And then we have the song of Moses and Miriam. We can probably compare it to that pretty well, and also compare it to what is written in chapter 9 verses 8 through 15 in the Abimelech story. But the issue here, or the substance of this text, gets back to what Yahweh is doing among his people, the deliverance that he is going to give to them. It talks about this being in the days of Shamgar, the son of Anath. It talks about being the days of Jael, that there was a need for the rise of Deborah as a judge because there was unfaithfulness among the people. There is this enemy that needs to be pursued. There's a great battle that's going to take place. And who comes to help? Well, Ephraim comes to help. Benjamin comes to help. Manasseh comes to help. Zebulun comes to help. Issachar comes to help. They all come and gather in this battle. But we don't see Reuben. We don't see Gad. We don't see Dan. We don't see Asher. They seem to be preoccupied with other things. They're not going to come help. But you know what? Zebulun and Naphtali, they certainly will. They're mentioned again in verse number 18. So we have the evil kings, the pagan kings who are fighting. We have the Israelites fighting, but really who's doing the fighting? Those who are really doing the fighting are the stars that fought from the heavens. I believe this is a reference to supernatural beings who would have been fighting on behalf of God's people. And it says specifically that the river Kishon, excuse me, swept away Sisera and his warriors and his chariots and such in their path. So I put that together with chapter 4 and verses 14 to 15. And it seems to me that the way that Yahweh threw them into a panic was something to do with a lot of water, something to do with the river Kishon. Ancient Near Eastern thought saw their conception of where rain comes from was from the stars, that the stars sent rain, and that those stars represented supernatural beings. So that seems to be what's in play here, that the stars, the supernatural beings, sent the water from Yahweh and swept away and caused a panic for the people, or for the armies of Jabin and Sisera, to the point that they were able to be easily overtaken. That seems to be what's going on here, if I'm reading this correctly. And then there's a curse that's actually given to the people of Meroz. Not really sure. Nobody's really sure if these are Israelites who were behaving like pagans, or maybe these were pagans who were in an agreement with the Israelites and they just failed. They failed to come help Yahweh's people, and for that they were cursed. Now, there's a woman here that shows herself to be more faithful and more brave than those men of Meroz, and that is Jael. There's a victory taunt here that she's just a regular old tent-dwelling woman, and she took down this incredible warlord in Sisera. She is crushing the enemy, and she's praised for that. We see her righteousness in fighting against the enemy of Yahweh's people, and that is contrasted with Sisera's mother, who is looking through the window. You can imagine her back in the place where he is from, which would have been, let's see here, Harosheth of the nations. And that she is back in Harosheth of the nations, and she's waiting for she's waiting for Sisera to come back. And she's wondering, why is he taking so long? Why don't I hear him? And then they're thinking together, oh, well, maybe they're not finding maybe they are dividing up the spoil. Maybe they're dividing up the women. Maybe he's still looking for an embroidered garment for my neck. This is just an evil woman who has no care and concern for the death that he might be carrying out. She just wants to make sure that she gets something nice out of it. And she just wants to make sure that the men are able to take a woman or two for spoil for themselves. Again, pagan nations that have no regard for life, no regard for righteousness between people at all. It's just about conquering and taking what they want. But of course, she's never going to see her son again because he has been shamefully, in their eyes, taken out by a regular old tent-dwelling woman named Jael. So Yahweh, may your enemies perish as Sisera did. And at the end of this, the text tells us that the land had peace for 40 years. The land had peace for 40 years. So thinking about this story again here of Deborah and Barak and Sisera and Jael, we again see those who need to step up. They're going to step up. There are going to be some who are cowards like Barak, but there are going to be others who are willing to step up and get the job done like Deborah and Jael. And may we learn a lesson from that. May we be people who are willing to step up and do what is necessary in order to accomplish what God will strengthen us to accomplish. Because again, he is the one who is really at work here. It is Yahweh who threw Sisera and his armies, his charioteers, into a panic. It was Yahweh who handed Sisera over to them. It was God who subdued King Jabin here. It was the stars, I believe, again, the heavenly host who are helping Yahweh in causing the rain to come and flooding out everything. God is at work. The question is, are we going to be at work with him or not? I think that's one of the great lessons we learn here from the story of Deborah and Barak and Jael as well, taking out Sisera and King Jabin. If you have any questions about this text, please feel free to leave that in the comments section below. And I'd love to do my best to answer those questions or have a good conversation with you from this text. I hope you will be back again tomorrow as we read together from Judges chapter 6, which is going to see the opening portion of Gideon's section here. Gideon's story has a couple of different parts to it. So we have really the epilogue portion of his section, which is opening portion, and then we have a kind of a prologue section, and then an epilogue section. I'll pull that up real fast, actually, here if I can find it really quickly. Looking at the let's see if it's on here. It's not here. Looking at the structure of the let's see. Looking at the structure of this book, which again, it's circular in nature in some ways, and then it also parallels with the man, I guess I don't have it on here. Let's see. Maybe I don't. Again, trying to get my laptop back in working order here. I'm trying to see if I can find. Oh, here we go. All right, there we go. Trying to figure out where everything is now. All right, let me share this real fast. Looking at, make it a little smaller so you see everything. Looking at this structure of Judges. Again, we have the downward spiral where people just get worse and worse. And then we have here again this the structure where it shows the parallels between the books or between the different stories in the book. So Deborah and Barak, as I mentioned, has some similarities between Abimelech and then Tola and Jair as well. Then once we get here, Gideon split into a couple of different parts. There is a prologue section in the first couple of chapters, and then there is an epilogue section in chapter 8. So Gideon by far is going to be the longest, I believe, the longest section here within the read through the Judges. So we will knock that out here over the next 3 days or so, since the chapters themselves are decently long. We'll read those in 3 different parts. So we will read together tomorrow in chapter 6, which addresses Midian's oppression of Israel and how Gideon is called to go and to take care of that, to step up to be the leader at this time. But we're really going to see a number of issues that Gideon has that, again, shows him to not exactly be the great hero that we might envision the Judges to be. Really, they're warlords. They're warriors, and a lot of times they're not the most faithful people in the world. So we'll have a few lessons to learn from them as we read about Gideon over the next 3 chapters or so. Again, hope you'll tune in for that tomorrow as we get into Judges chapter 6. Take care, and God bless.